Hello, I'm Tara Ruckman.
And I'm Stephanie Howe, and we are Control the Chaos EDU. Are you burnout? Are you feeling frustrated or overwhelmed?
Or maybe it's the opposite and you're a go-getter and want to level up. Then it's time to dive in with real talk and solution-focused conversations. Hello, and welcome to today's Control the Chaos conversation. So today we're going to be talking a lot about tips. Not really as many resources today, but a lot of tips. So it's a lot of human conversation and real talk coming from us today. We do have one resource to share, a data binder for first year teachers. But again, if your resident educator program already has that type of thing, they might be using your state's form and not necessarily something like this, but it is something that you can organize. But other than that, we're going to be sharing a lot of tips and real talk today. So let's get down to it. So I just have this story about my first year in teaching. I had a mentor that is now a vice principal at a very large school in our district, and she is absolutely amazing. And one of the first things she said to me, and I'll never forget this, and this is probably like, if I could think out of all of the things that she said to me, this was probably the most true thing that anyone could ever say to me, is she said, I think I might have said this before too, stay out of the break rooms. And I was like, taken back for a minute, because you think about making relationships your first year in teaching, but you're telling me to stay out of the break rooms. And she said, well, not all the time, just in moments where people are frustrated. Okay, well, that makes a little bit of sense. She said, well, don't get pulled into like that web or that vortex of somebody that may have been there for a really long time, and they have some things that have occurred along the way that can take you down a wrong path, some negativity per se, or frustrations, because we all have those, don't we? I mean, we all get in that time where we're like overwhelmed. We have training to do, we have public school works to do, we have TBTs, we have SBTs, and we have all this work to do on them. We have planning, we have IEPs, all the things that keep piling up. So she said, make time to build relationships, but make sure you stay out of the break rooms. So what I can take away from that is kind of our first topic is make sure you're finding good mentors. You want to build relationships, but make sure those relationships that you're building are good mentors. And how do you find those? How do you figure out who those good mentors are? I'm sure Stephanie has tips, but like one of my tips is think about like what people are saying. So, are they always solution focused or are they always problem focused? If you're in the break room or you're, in the morning walking around talking to teachers or during lunchtime or whenever that is, and every time you talk to them, they have a problem, but they never have a solution, maybe that's not the best mentor for you. But if you come across somebody and they're willing to be solutions focused, like, yes, I have this problem, I don't have enough time to do X, Y, and Z, but how can we work through it to figure out where we can get the time or what we can adjust in our schedule to make this happen, because we're here for the students, right? So if we need to take baseline data on a student, but we can't find the time to do it, how can we rearrange our schedule or have people cover or use a parapro, or you take over the class and co-teach for me, or whatever it is, to find the time. So that's how we find good mentors. Look for those solution focused people. Steph, how else can you provide some tips about finding good mentors within your school or your building?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like people are kind of forced upon you, right? Like you're
Yeah.
on their team or you work with their grade level, like you're going to have to collaborate with those people. And so you're going to have to figure out how to make that work. But then it's like finding those other people outside of your grade band or places like that. I think it's by kind of watching their actions too. So like if they say something, do they follow through? Are they able to give really good advice to you and not just vent? And yeah, I know as teachers, sometimes we do just need a vent, right? Like our job is really hard, but also just trying to say, hey, I have this problem and looking for solutions. Also, are they providing a safe space for you to vent, or are they going to go down and tell the principal? So all of those things are really important. Um, but again, it's kind of being nice to everybody at first, and then figuring out who you can really trust. So don't open up like right away. Just kind of feel the waters, see how things are going, and just do whatever you can those first couple weeks to build those relationships. But once you get into, I would say, October, you start to see people's personalities start to show, because October is a really hard month for teachers.
Yeah, it's the month where you don't have any breaks, right?
Yeah.
Like you have Labor Day in September, and August is kind of a half month. If you even started school in August, some people start in September. Yeah, October seems to be like that month that the content gets harder, so behavior could increase in the classrooms. There's all kinds of things that go on in October. It is a tough month. But I do like that you said, everybody does need to vent. That is so true. We all need our time to vent, but it's what you do after it, right? It's like when you have a problem, how do you react to it? Do you just sit and complain about it all the time? Or when you're faced with that problem, do you vent it out and then, okay, how are we going to fix this? Okay, how are we going to make the time to get this done? Okay, what are we going to do that's best for kids? So I think making sure that those are the people that you're looking for, because in your first year too, you're going to be faced with many challenges. So that might be tough. So when you are faced with those challenges, how do you react towards it? So finding good mentors that are good problem solvers is really important. And I know, and think about, your mentors as well. Like Steph is a mentor to me with technology and things. You might have different mentors that have different strengths. Um, if I'm looking for reading support, I'm going to Libby Elizabeth Brinson. She's in Pickerington School District and she is an OG supervisor. So if I have a problem and I'm thinking about I need to provide this reading support, I'm going to her because she's amazing and a problem solver there. If somebody in our district is looking for behavior support, they would come to me. So think about too, it's not just about having one mentor, because I would expect like you know, somebody as well, a good tip for a mentor, if somebody is always answering your questions, they're not strong in every single thing. But if somebody says to you, hey, I'm really having this issue with tech and I try to solve it and I don't send them to Steph, am I being the best mentor myself? Like, if I'm doing things that are not my strength, so look for those people too that will send people in your direction, because that's important. They send you to people that have strengths and not try to answer everything themselves. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Am I saying the right words?
Yeah, I mean, it's so true because we need a community of people. Like, I am not strong in behavior, but there's certain things that I've learned from Tara that have made me a lot stronger. And so when I'm talking with a mentor, because a lot of times when you are starting off in teaching, that's hard. Managing a class of 25, 35 students. I mean, I know our class sizes are really large. It's really important to be able to manage a class, and that's something you don't learn, right? Like, that's not something that is taught to you because you usually enter student teaching in December. And so the class is already pretty well managed by that host teacher that's coming in. And so it's important when you are running into those different issues to know who you can reach out to, who you can help, or anything like that. So, building up that network of people and saying, hey, I do need help with this, is your first step, because a lot of times you might feel like, oh, I can do it. I need to figure it out on my own. But really, there's this larger community of people willing to help if you just step up and say, does anyone have this support or this resource or whatever you need? Then people can really start to help and aid you through the way.
Yeah, I think that's one, like last week, I'll give you an example. I got an email from a teacher that is now teaching a yoga class in our school district. And they were like, Steph told me that you are a yoga instructor. I was like, how about that? So, like, of course, Steph didn't try to say, oh, watch this video, do this, do that, because she's not a yoga educator, right? She automatically sent that person to me. And then I was able to provide a whole bunch of lessons because I have experience in that. So that's like what real leaders and real mentors do. If it's not their strength, they send you in the direction of somebody else instead of trying, and that's a way to solve the problem, right? So those are the kind of mentors that you want to look for, the ones that have those strong communities of people and are willing to kind of help you problem solve some of those things. So make time to build relationships. When you're in the break room and you're having conversation, take it or leave it, know what's good and bad, with those problem solvers, and build time within your day to make conversations with the teachers in the community around you.
Yeah, and I think it's true too. I know my first year, I felt stressed that I had to be and know the curriculum, right? Like, I had to teach the curriculum, and sometimes that didn't allow space for relationships with my students. So I had this one kid that one day he walked in and he needed somebody to talk to. But I felt like I still had to teach the curriculum because I was like, well, he's just one student and all these other kids still need it. And so stop and pause and really build those relationships with your students. I think I didn't realize that until year 2 or 3, but that first year I just felt so stressed out by the curriculum. But it's got to be those relationships as well that you're focusing on that first year. Which then kind of brings us to reflection. So there can be a lot of good and a lot of bad things that might happen that first year. A lot of trial and error, which is natural, right? Like, I don't know if this is going to work, so just try it out. And if it doesn't work, you're going to reflect on it. However, if you are a perfectionist, just focus on maybe improving in 1 to 3 different areas and no more. So don't try to do everything that you can. Really just kind of say, okay, these are the areas that I feel like are really weak points for me, and focus on those 3 different areas and start to make small improvements. Um, and what I kind of like is how last month we talked about the 20-day PBIS plan. Think about that in a way for those areas. What is something that you can do for the next 20 days to build up on that weakness? So if you are struggling with staying organized, maybe every Friday, or you kind of set up a 20-day plan where you are going to put things in folders, or you're going to organize your Google Drive, or you're going to do different things. Maybe if it's lesson planning, you're going to make copies on Monday. On this day, you're going to do this, and so on. But really just start small and think about it in long terms. What am I going to do each day to build on this area to make it a strength?
Yeah, and I think too, not thinking about your professional growth plan, like those big overarching goals, like, right, like I'm going to do this in iReady scores, or I'm going to complete year 1 of the resident educator, but just making sure it's like the little things. It doesn't have to be like this big overarching goal. I mean, I know one of mine this year was getting control of my email, because I would have 50 emails in a day, and I had 6,000 emails sitting in my inbox. So each day, setting aside time to go through my email, make some files within the email and file them. Like, what are those things that you can do just to think to help to organize you? So, I mean, it doesn't have to be organization. That's kind of like an easy one because we all need organization. So, but it doesn't have to be that. If you're really good at organization, like Steph is really good at organization, she has hubs and everything all over the place and folders, like her digital organization. It's like what I aspire to be. But what is the one thing that you're weak in? If you already have that digital organization skill, what's the one thing that you're weak in that you could focus on? And this kind of thinking about those 1 to 3 areas is kind of like what I like to think about when we're focusing on behavior. If you can't focus on everything all at once, because you're not going to get anything, or you'll get a lot of things done and it's going to be halfway done, right? If you try to focus on too many things. So what are those 1 to 3 areas that you could focus on? Maybe it's digital organization. Maybe it's organization of your lesson plans, or maybe it is scheduling a time to meet with a paraprofessional and talk about data if you have a paraprofessional that works with you. There's so many different things, little things that you can reflect on. So do that often, but don't overwhelm with your things, and use kids too. Like, that's important. Get your feedback from your students when you're reflecting. So use your student data if you're doing some assessments. Like, ask them, what'd you like about this lesson? What did you not like about this lesson? What was challenging? What was hard? Did you understand? Do I need to show you in a different way? So that way, you can use their words, their conversation, their discussion to help see what areas you need to focus on too. Because if you're always teaching one way and they never get it that way, maybe that's something that you can work on and try to teach another way.
Yeah, which brings us to getting comfortable, right? So getting comfortable with data. There is going to be a lot of different assessments, a lot of different formative maybe where it is ongoing, where you might realize, oh my gosh, I thought my students understood, but really they don't. And so you have to take that data and be able to kind of the next day um, show up and provide any misconceptions and provide some understanding to your students. Also, I think it's important to not grade every single thing, because there's so much that is practice, and then there can be those quick checks. So when it's practice, maybe you're just kind of quickly glancing over and seeing how students do, but you might use like an exit ticket where you might just grade 2 questions to see if they understand. So again, building in places for that self-assessment, maybe where students can grade each other, um, and having that peer-to-peer feedback and building that up in your community can help you. Also, those conferences with your students rather than taking every single piece of paper home. So again, don't get lost in the grading, but get comfortable with the data and being okay to say, okay, I'm not going to look this over. This was just practice. Or, hey, we're going to go over this in small group or large group and just kind of have the students self assess how they did.
Yeah, I remember my first year when we're talking about assessment. I remember my first year, I felt like every single night I was grading papers. I don't know about anybody else, but that's my experience. I would bring home papers and I would sit in front of the TV and I would be grading writing, grading social studies. Um, I would be grading just about everything that they did. Well, then I started realizing, okay, I spend like every single night sitting on my couch, and my husband is like, grading again, grading again. are you grading again? I don't know how many times I heard that in my first year. Um, so don't do that. Don't grade everything. Just make those short assessments that you could take away in the moment and realize some things don't require grading if you're walking around and you can just do a quick eye over it and put a star over it. Not every single thing that a student does in classroom has to be graded. So take that into account as well. You can kind of get a glance and get an overall view of what the students are doing if it's a practice worksheet or if it's a practice activity, but not everything has to go in the grade book. Not everything has to be a piece of evidence. Some of it could be practice, some of it could be informative, just an overall view, but don't spend all your time grading because at the end of the day, you don't need 50 assignments in one marking period to show what the student learns, right? So just think about that as well. So, staying organized with your bag of tricks. I think this is really important. So where I go with this next topic when we start thinking about it is like what are your emergency plans? What are like some creative tricks and tips that are in your back pocket that if something goes chaotic, something goes wrong, the lesson doesn't go well, it was a fail forward, right? We tried it, it was a bust, it didn't work out. The kids got a little too off task or whatnot. What can I do to change my plans in like a quick turnaround? So having some of those like things that you found to be successful or maybe don't know if they're successful, but this kind of bag of tricks that if a lesson doesn't work out, I can go to this real quickly and get the class back on task and headed in the right direction, and then we could go back and revisited what failed about that thing later. Is that one of those tips and tricks that you would say you would think about as a first year teacher?
Yeah, and I just think too, you get a lot of different ideas your first year. And so try different things. And if it does work, add it to your pile to reuse and kind of keep. Also, when you think about maybe parent emails and you're communicating, maybe you start to save some of those templates so that way for next year, you can just copy and paste and kind of re put in the dates or you can re add different details. But again, just start to think about how can I save time by you reusing some of these different things that I'm using in my classroom currently.
I like that about the emails when I'm thinking about that because there's been so many emails that I've sent along the way and the start of the year kind of format. And I think every year I go back and rewrite those. If I would have in the very beginning taken a Google Doc or taken some kind of organization of my emails, I could just go back and copy and paste that email the next year, plug students' names and information in, and and there you go because you already have it formatted. But I never did that. And I just recently started doing that, probably in the last 2.5 years, and it saves you so much time if
Yeah.
you can just go back and copy and paste and not have to rewrite it over again. Because more than likely, you are going to come up with that situation again, right? Like, you're gonna teach that lesson, you're gonna struggle with that behavior in class, a student is gonna do a really good job and you wanna send some positive shout outs. That's a really good one too. Send in those positive shout outs as well. So you have, some positive emails written so that when somebody does something good, you could just copy and paste that email and send it off. I think making sure you build those relationships going backwards. Sorry, now I'm going to go off track and go backwards to building the relationships, but building parent relationships too.
Mhm.
That's a great way to build parent relationships, because one of the worst things that could happen your first year is that you struggle with parent relationships, because if you get some parents and you hadn't built that relationship and they're upset about something that you've taught or something that you're not doing or you are doing, then what happens, that's very stressful. Like, when you have a parent upset with you, that can be very stressful. So making sure you build those relationships with parents too.
Yeah, and what I do, I mean, I still do it, is I have a yearly to-do list. So I do it by month. So like August, September, October, I put all the months in my to-do list. And then I put like all the tasks that I did for August. So that way when I go back the next year, I just pull up I make a copy of it. I edit what I don't need anymore. So I'm like, oh, we don't need that training anymore. Like our teachers are good with it. I can delete it. Or I don't need to do this, but I need to do this instead. I can add that. And then I also hyperlink. So for new teachers, I send out an email that just kind of says, this is who I am. So rather than rewriting that every year, I just hyperlink it in my to-do list for August. And it'll just kind of eases that anxiety for me to go, okay, this is what I have to do. And if I don't get to maybe everything on the list, what can I move to the next month? Like, what is a priority? But typically, it just helps to have everything in that one space. So that way I know, okay, at the end of the year, I need to remind people, how do you transfer your Google documents if you're leaving our district? How do you transfer ownership if you're retiring? And so I need to have all of those different things ready, because if I forget or I don't send it out, I mean, people will still survive. It just makes me feel a little bit better about my life.
All right. So making you feel a little bit better about your life, that's like self-care, right? Which
Yeah.
leads us to the next thing is self-care. I mean, this is super important your first year of teaching. Making sure that you don't work every night. I touched a little bit about grading, not grading every night, but this is really overall. Like in our first year, we don't have a lot of resources, right? Like we don't have the emails written, we don't have the resources built, we don't have, our Google Drive full of worksheets or activities or choice boards. Those are all something that we start creating or building through other people. Hopefully you're not buying from teachers pay teachers, but you're building from the people that are around you. But not working every night. Like, it is really easy to sit down and sit in front of your computer every night and be working on something for your classroom. And you don't want to do that because you're going to get burned out really fast. So schedule a time. Schedule, like, say on Tuesdays, if and I know that you're going to work, like, I'm not telling you to work outside of your contracted day, but if you are going to work outside of your contracted day, schedule a time to do that so that you're not working every night. Like, every Tuesday, I'm going to work for this span of time, and this is going to be dedicated to like my first year teaching resources. Or I'm going to work for 30 minutes at the beginning of every day. Whatever it is, but don't let it get out of hand. Make sure that you are not getting burnt out that first year, because that can easily happen because you're overwhelmed with so many new things. I had a new teacher that I met with last week, and she was like, I just have so much to do. I am working every night. I am always doing something. I have this training I have to do. I have IEPs to write. I don't have any of the resources. And she was purchasing stuff. And I was like, please don't purchase anything. She's like, well, I don't have time to make anything. Then that goes back to building the relationships, right? Because if you have relationships and you're building and you have the people that are around you, same grade level, reach out to those people because they might have some of those resources already. So I was like, don't don't purchase things. Number 1, we have so much in the district. We have so many resource sources. We have so many people you could reach out to. Um, Number 1, I don't want you to purchase anything. Number 2, I don't want you to spend all your time working to create it. So just go back to building those relationships and self-care. Sorry, I got off topic, got back to relationships. But the original topic was self-care. Make sure that you're not working every night. You're doing something for yourself that's outside of school, and you continue to take care of this yourself in ways so that you don't get burnout in your first year, because that first year is probably one of the toughest years that you'll ever face in education, no matter what year it is, whether we're coming out of COVID, we were in COVID, whatever it is, that's a tough year. So make sure that you take care of yourself and you don't get burnout and you reach out to the people that are around you.
And I think sometimes as teachers, we make it a competition. Like, I worked this many hours this week, and you're like, oh, I want to, show them. And so there were nights I remember my first year where I stayed really late and um it wasn't good. And so set those boundaries and know, hey, it's okay. It's okay to tell people I only did this or I did this weekend, like change the competition because I know you can get sucked into it when you start to listen to other teachers talk about how much they're working. Um, and think about ways that you can cut down. Are there systems or workflows that you're able to save some time with or automate some things where instead of grading, you can set up a Google form where it'll auto grade for you? Like, is there different things like that that you can do to also kind of save that time and schedule if you need to times to do self-care things? So whether that's hang out with your friends on the weekend or do something, watch a movie, schedule that time in because if it's not scheduled, it won't happen.
Uh,
Um,
I I really love that you just said don't make that a competition. Like, I literally hear people saying, and I do it too, like,
uh-huh.
"Oh, I worked this, I was up at this time." I mean, I'm naturally a morning person, so I always wake up early and work, but we should be competing for, like, I got all this done in my day and I don't have to work. Right? Like, compete with somebody on, like, the amount of things that you could do within your school day, not the amount of things that you do outside of your school day. So that way you know you have time for yourself.
Yeah, and I think I mean, sometimes I'll just text Sarah and I'm like, I'm not working today. And it's just like, I know she doesn't care, but, like, telling someone, "Hey, I am not doing this," makes me feel better. Like, I don't know why, but sometimes just find that person that you can, though, have that accountability with. And, like, another person is Ashley Holcomb. She'll be like, "Stephanie, your computer's broken." And that just reminds me, like, it can wait until tomorrow. It doesn't need to be done right now. And so just having those people that do remind you, like, no, you need to go take time for yourself. You need to go do something fun. You need to focus on your family or whatever is going on in your life. And telling you, hey, your computer's broken this weekend, so you can't do anything. And it will be there Monday.
Yeah, that's really hard to do.
It is hard. It
I
is.
know. I text you and Akila every Thursday. I'm like, it's date night. I'm stepping away. I'm not answering text messages or anything else. But it's hard to do. Like, I actually last Thursday, I left my phone at home and didn't even take it out of the house with me on date night with my husband, because I know that if I get a message, I'm like looking at my phone, like the glow that comes up, and you're like, you want to pick it up and read it, you want to answer, you want to look at the emails that come through because you know that you get a lot of them, so you don't want to leave them sit there. So I actually left my phone purposely because I know that sometimes it's hard for me not to answer. So if you have to do that, right? Like, if you have the struggle that I have and you want to pick up your phone all the time, put it out of your reach so you can't, because if it's too much of a, like, distraction for you, That's part of your self-care too, knowing what you can and can't do. And I know that if my phone is there, I have a really hard time not answering somebody. So I just leave it at home.
Yeah, which is hard, but you gotta set up those boundaries.
Yeah, 100%. That's
Yeah.
self-care so you don't burn yourself out.
Yeah. So your call to action is to think about one of these tips and how you can kind of use it this week. Are you going to build time for relationships? Are you going to reflect on maybe a weakness? Are you going to try to get comfortable with data and say, no, I'm not going to grade everything? Or maybe try to upload something to a digital platform so it auto grades for you? Are you going to stay organized and start to build that bag of tricks? Or take some time for yourself. So pick one of those areas and let us know what you're going to be doing. Please feel free to share on social media. Also, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast and share with other friends. Maybe some of those new relationships, you can share this podcast with them. So until next time, make sure you control the chaos. Thanks for listening to Control the Chaos EDU. Check out the description for show notes.
We look forward to connecting with you on social media. Subscribe to the weekly podcast so you never miss an episode. Control the chaos. Until next time.